This episode of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoy the show and want it to continue, please support us on Patreon over at patreon.com/geeks or via PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. And I want to give a special thank you to Ignacio, Sashini Darmarante, Soren, Timothy Alcock, and KW Reed, who all just signed up this month to support us on Patreon. So big thanks again to everyone who's contributed. We really appreciate it. All right, so now let's get to our show. Hi, I'm David Barr Kirtley, author of the book Save Me, Please, and Other Stories, and welcome to episode 578 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Today on the show, we'll be discussing Season 1 of the Netflix series Terminator Zero, an animated spin-off of the classic films Terminator and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And this will include spoilers for everything in the show, so just be aware of that. And I'm joined by two guests. So first up, we've got Daniel H. Wilson, making his sixth appearance on the show. He holds a PhD in robotics from Carnegie Mellon University and is the New York Times bestselling author of 6 novels, including Robopocalypse, The Clockwork Dynasty, and Amped. His latest novel, The Andromeda Evolution, a sequel to Michael Crichton's The Andromeda Strain, is out now. So, Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And also joining us today is Zach Chapman, making his 18th appearance on the show. His short fiction appears in Nature, Tales to Terrify, and Writers of the Future, and he's also the creator of the comic book series House of Blood and The Spellslinger, and co-creator of the comic book series A Haunting on Mars. His latest comic book series, Kaiju Blues, is currently live on Kickstarter. So, Zach, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me back.
Okay, so let's start off with Daniel, and have you tell us about your expectations going into Terminator Zero.
So I didn't really read much before I went into it. I knew that it was on my list. Obviously, I'm interested in all things robotic. My expectations, I saw maybe a couple of reviews that were mixed, right? Some people seem to really love it, and other people seem to not enjoy it so much. And so just kind of going in, I suddenly realized that it was very familiar. I started realizing, it feels like bits and pieces of the original Terminator and Terminator 2 have kind of been put in a blender and then served back out with some of my favorite stuff from those films, and then also some of the stuff that's always driven me crazy from those films as well. So that was how it went for me at first. I don't know how much you want me to dive in.
Well, I'm just curious, just briefly, what are some of those things that drive you crazy about Terminator films?
Well, the logic of it, right? The rules. So, okay, for instance, if you have like a T-800 or whatever, what are the rules? You know, whenever a Terminator is designed to murder somebody and it walks up, and it has a grip strength that can crush skulls easily, and it picks up the person and then throws the person farther away from itself instead of just crushing his face. That drives me crazy. That's driven me nuts in Terminator, and it's what they do. It's almost like a horror movie where it's the slow stalk. It's like the Jason or whoever, walking slowly toward the victim. And that's always driven me crazy whenever the Terminator doesn't make logical decisions about what it's trying to do, because it is a robot. And then the other thing that's
actually, let me just jump in there, because I just want to underscore. This has always stuck in my mind from the first time I interviewed you about Robopocalypse that you just said, if the Terminator gets his hands on you, it would be like you're getting pulled into a wood chipper or like something like that. I mean, you'd just be pulped instantly.
Yeah. And so whenever I see that happening, that kind of drives me crazy. Or when they just ignore the physical constraints and parameters of the machine. So for instance, I mean, they're really heavy, right? They're made of metal inside. And so, if you, for instance, had one hanging on your foot, you'd slip off of whatever rope you're clinging to. So stuff like that drives me crazy, and kind of the physical sort of moment to moment micro sort of thinking about it, and the macro stuff, the philosophical stuff, like the high level, contemplating our interactions with an alien intelligence in the form of an artificial intelligence. Skynet has always really bothered me. And you've probably heard me rant about this before too, just because it's so one dimensional, right? All it wants to do is kill all humans. I mean, it's just, how boring is that? As a villain, that's very boring. And what is it? It's self-preservation. That's the reason. I mean, what does it actually want to do? There's no, and I feel like we never explore what Skynet actually wants to do. It literally only exists in relation to humanity, and it only really exists as wanting to destroy humanity. It's like obsessed with us, right? Which I think is like sort of very fitting for humans. We're obsessed with us, So of course, an AI would be completely defined by its desire to kill us, the big, dangerous, scary, awful, worthless human society or human civilization. So those are the things that have always bothered me about Terminator. But obviously, the things that are great about Terminator are just, just the crazy action. I like the time travel stuff in the original Terminators. I like that it's sort of solves itself neatly. That doesn't really happen in this series, but anyway, and just the relentless nature of it and the action and all that. Obviously, I love those two movies. They're a lot of fun, but they do drive me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I just love Terminator and Terminator 2 pretty much unreservedly. I mean, they're just two of my all-time favorite movies. I can even sort of enjoy some of the other movies a little bit in bits and pieces. But I'm definitely a huge Terminator fan. But certainly it is a franchise that has been on life support in recent years, I would say.
Yeah.
So Daniel, did you share that impression going into this, that this is a series that is, not in the peak of its health these days?
I mean, it never panders necessarily. I mean, I guess it does, but yet you definitely see that it's been reconstructed from the pieces of Terminator, right? It's like they deconstructed Terminator and Terminator 2 and then just reconfigured it a little bit. So yeah, I gotta say it was really hard for me to finish the series. It was a bit of a slog. I feel like it kind of picked up at the very end. There were some sort of revelations, but I will also say I'm a dad. I have 3 kids. I know we're all dads on this call, and that guy Malcolm, man, the way I don't know that he was ever even in a scene with his children. I mean, I had a lot of trouble relating to these characters. I had a lot of trouble finding empathy or sympathy with these characters, and therefore I had a lot of trouble caring about what's going to happen to the characters. All
right. Well, let me get Zach in here. So, Zach, expectations going into Terminator Zero.
I think I had heard from someone, read some review that this was good, so I had kind of fairly high expectations, and I'm a very, very big fan of Terminator 2. It's like top 3 movies for me of all time. Like it was on repeat in my household while I was growing up, and I found appreciation for Terminator 1 later. So like we rewatched it this year, and I was like, oh man, it is a slasher movie. Like it is like the Jason Voorhees, and I like really, really like it for that. And I actually like the aspect that this show is cribbing from those 2 movies. Like the tone is pretty spot on. So I like the tone. Like there are things that I do like about the show, but I'm agreeing with everything that's been said so far. That Daniel is saying about the show, but yeah, my expectations were high. So I was pretty, very quickly, but basically by like episode 3, I was like pretty like, oh, this is, not meeting my expectations. And by the end, I just felt like it got worse and worse. And it was difficult for me to finish. But I think some of that had to do with having rewatched very, very recently the Terminator 1 and 2. And I actually haven't watched all of the others in the franchise. So I tapped out at the fourth one. I just like, I'm not going to watch anymore.
The fifth was the nadir for me. It was like, oh my God.
But yeah, I had high expectations and was pretty thoroughly disappointed. Outside of like the things that I do like about it, which are some like the action, which, you know, the first episode had the great action, but as Daniel was saying, like there's things that are not forgivable when you have like a 900-pound metal machine grabbing onto your ankle, going like 40 miles per hour, being pulled by gravity. It would just break every bone in your spine. And we just don't see like the physics of it. We don't see that. And some of it's anime. But yeah, you do see the Terminators be pretty incompetent, and then also have like physics be really not in their favor. Like,
what did you? I mean, Zach,
fantastically not in their favor.
You're kind of a comic book guy, animation guy. What did you think of the? So I guess I'll mention. So this was, I think I said it's a Netflix show, and Netflix was approached. Wait, I have it written down here. Wow, I have so many notes here I can't even find it. Okay, somebody who owns the rights, and they approached Netflix. Some production company owns the rights, and they approached Netflix, and Netflix said, "Yeah, Terminator, we'd love to do that." And so they reached out to this guy, Mattson Tomlin, and he wrote the script. And then the animation was done by a Japanese studio, Production IG, who is best known for doing Ghost in the Shell, which is really badass. So I thought that visually, I thought this was really cool. I thought the Terminators looked cool, and it had, there was a lot of like cool sort of like lighting, like red lighting around the edges of the characters and stuff like that. But yeah, I guess I'm just curious, Zach, what did you think of, just on a visual level, what did you think of the show?
Yeah, visually, I thought it was really good. I really liked how this thing looks. It's just and when you can look past the well, that would break every bone in her spine. When you look past that, it's still really cool. It's like, all right, well, this character ran up. Like if you look at the characters like a superhero or like something that's like not like, she could just take out like 3 Terminators. That's just like how awesome these characters are, like how they run up walls and do all kinds of like Matrix style action. It's cool. Like once you get past that, it's like, oh yeah, this looks great. And then you mentioned like the highlights, like on the rendering of the characters, like the level, the layers that they choose to highlight on certain characters is, I feel like it's pretty rarely seen. And it looks like it does look like a panel out of a comic book, like or manhwa or something. It looks really cool seeing that, like the colors that they chose to like highlight certain characters. I 100% agree with you. And I like made a mental note, like while seeing them, like, you don't see that every day. I mean, that like it's a nice touch visually. So. Yeah.
Okay, wait. So I found my notes. Okay, so Skydance is the production company that owns the Terminator rights. And so Mattson Tomlin, he was one of the writers on the Batman, the recent movie. He was uncredited, but he was part of the writing team. And I think he's just like the main writer on the Batman Part 2, the upcoming sequel. And he's also going to be doing a Mega Man script and a Berserker script.
That's funny. I pitched on that.
You pitched on Mega Man or Berserker?
Mega Man, yeah.
And then he also he wrote and directed a feature film called Mother/Android, which is some sort of robot uprising kind of thing.
I think I watched that.
It doesn't have a very good score on Rotten Tomatoes, but But I don't know. It looks like he has a lot of cool projects going on. I watched a bunch of interviews with him, and I actually found him a pretty intelligent, likable interview subject. So,
well, I loved the Batman. I thought the script was really good. Like for what it was going for, I really liked that script.
So like, it sounds like, I mean, I would say I liked this Netflix series pretty well. It sounds like I'm going to be maybe the one defending it on this panel. I was definitely on the fence for the first 3 episodes. I felt, it seemed a little like, like the children character is it just kind of seems like a little bit like not adult in those first couple episodes. But I thought that, contrary to what Zach was saying, I thought it got better and better as it went along. So I guess I'll just explain. So the premise, we've mentioned some of the action things we found unconvincing, which I totally agree with that. But so the basic premise is that it's the year 1997, and there's this scientist named Malcolm Lee, and he is having dreams about how Judgment Day, this nuclear war initiated by Skynet, the sinister computer system, that this nuclear war is going to start, and he wants to stop it. And so he's been creating this, what he hopes will be a good AI called Kokoro. This is in Japan. This good AI called Kokoro, which will be able to fight against Skynet, but he's not sure if he can trust it or not. And so as the story opens, he's having these conversations with it, trying to establish whether it will be helpful or dangerous. And then we also have some time traveling characters we meet, including Aiko, this woman we've been talking about, who's sort of this action, this human soldier from the future, who's sort of this action character. And then there's also a Terminator, similar to the T-800 from the first Terminator movie, the Arnold Schwarzenegger character, which has been sent back in time by Skynet to try to stop Kokoro. Because Kokoro and Skynet, we gather, become rivals in the future. Was that all? Was that reasonably coherent? Is there anything else I should add in terms of just the basic setup of this story?
I think that's good.
Yeah.
Well, Malcolm has three children that are nannied
completely ignored.
that are completely ignored and nannied by a character that has like this PTSD situation, or seemingly has some kind of PTSD.
She turns out to be a cyborg.
Yeah, so Malcolm, the scientist, he has this housekeeper named Misaki who seems sort of, like she has PTSD or something, and we don't initially know what her situation is. And then he has 3 kids who are kind of, I don't know, like 9 to 14 or so. The oldest is Kenta, who's sort of like a hacker gadget kind of kid. He has a daughter named Raika who likes robot cats and is very attached to the memory of their deceased mother. And then the youngest one is Hiro, who's kind of the joker, who kind of like is always trying to get everyone to get along, basically. I guess I'll just mention, since Daniel mentioned that we're all dads on this call, I currently have a 1-month-old daughter who was actually born on August 29th, Judgment Day, which has dropped a nuclear bomb on my life and productivity. So if I seem a little like scatterbrained on this episode, that's why. But so that's the basic setup. So Daniel, was there anything that you did like in the first half of the series?
I'm I liked that sort of how they were going for these big reveals, right? Like the idea that the nanny was a robot, the idea that we'll eventually find out that Malcolm came from the future, and we'll eventually find out that they're doing some new stuff with the time travel. and I love the swing that they took, but I can't say that I felt like any of it worked. I mean, so for instance, I've spent a lot of my career and time writing scenes where human beings are talking to AIs, potentially murderous AIs, you know? And what I've learned over the years is it's terrible. It's boring. It doesn't matter what you do if you put them in a giant room that's a crazy hologram where they can be anywhere and anything can happen, it's still boring. And these are like quasi philosophical discussions that have no point and are, by the way, just silly to even contemplate from the beginning. Because if you're trying to defeat a Skynet, why would you show up and build a Skynet and expect anything different to happen? So I just felt like the fact that this guy never gets out of this room with this AI, and he talks to this AI and ignores his children, who, by the way, are in life or death peril, like literally being hunted home with a nanny or whatever. And this guy never leaves this room for 8 episodes. I mean, I don't think
he knows that they are in danger.
He knows
it before
goddamn
that
and
they're
well.
in danger. Like like the implication is because he's from the future, he knows that they're going to be in danger. It's not like a question.
Yeah. So as a writer, a lot of times I will get defensive when people call me out and say, "Hey, the physics is wrong on this or that," and I say, "Hey, hold on and wait and watch until read the next chapter, and you'll find out that it does make sense." So, for instance, I was like, "Why the hell are there humanoid robots?" It's 1997, right? And I'm so for a lot of it, I was holding my suspension of disbelief, just holding on to it. And then you realize, oh, this guy came back to 97 from the future. He knows all about robots, and so he's affected the acceleration of robotics technology in Japan in particular, but in the world. And so, in terms of that world building, I love that, but I just feel like it never actually got sort of spread throughout spread throughout in a convincing way throughout the world. The world building felt like kind of loosey goosey. But I did love the big swings that they took in terms of revealing that stuff over time. I think that's a good way to do a series, but it just all has to hang.
These scenes, and there's so many scenes with Malcolm and Kokoro in that room, and they don't say a fucking thing. They don't say anything meaningful. She's like, "Why should we let humans live?" And he's like,
that's when you shut your shit down. That's when you shut it down. When it asks you that question. By the way, why didn't he just build an army of Terminators to go destroy Skynet before it could launch the nukes? Why the F is he going to build another super intelligent AI that's going to sit there and have philosophical conversations about whether or not to exterminate humanity? What?
Like, I understand the need. Like, I just read Left Hand of Darkness, and there's a lot of like characters like basically in situations where they're walking and then they're having philosophical conversations, and it's like it's never boring. And in this, it's like there's not like, okay, there are philosophical conversations, but why save humanity? What good thing has humanity done for Earth? And it's like,
and he can't answer
instead
that.
of the writer, like Malcolm just freezes. He just freezes. It's like, you don't have a single fucking thing to say, or he will like, it feels so like, because the story or because the plot, he says, well, I can't tell. He'll be like, well, I can't reveal it now. And that's for like the first,
they do that
over the first
times.
half. And she's like playing the piano and doing other like, like things that I just find like are intrinsic to anime and very cringe to like my whatever. Like, I get it. It's like my cultural sensibilities, but like I find I just can't like.
So I thought there was a huge opportunity here when he's interacting with this AI, and I honestly thought this would get paid off. This is a guy who I'm trying to explain to myself, why would this guy ignore his kids? Why is he in here with this weird simulacrum of a woman? And then you realize, oh, his wife, who he's presumably in love with and made babies with, was killed in like a sarin attack on a subway or whatever. And I'm like, okay, this guy is extremely sort of scarred and like traumatized by the loss of his wife, and maybe this is some sort of substitute for his wife, and maybe he's working through like grief or like, and then just no,
Yeah.
like no, he's cool, she's dead, he's fine.
Okay.
He just wants to talk philosophy.
All right. Point of order. Like his wife was killed in a bus accident when the bus driver had a heart attack. They do mention the sarin attack, but that was a different thing. Just in case any listeners are like yelling about
Daniel, pay attention.
But I mean, I basically agree with what you're saying about those scenes as they exist. I thought in concept, I don't have any problem in concept with the idea that he's talking to the AI and trying to decide whether he should turn it on or not. I mean, it sounds like Daniel has very strong opinions about how hard it is to make these kinds of scenes work. I mean,
he showed up in 97 with knowledge of how to build Terminators. He showed up literally with a Terminator. That is incredibly powerful, right? And also very, really smart. All he had to do was send her to the United States and murder everybody that's on the research team. That's the end.
Okay, but I mean, yeah, I mean that. Well, there's lots of other ways the story could have gone, but given the basic setup, I didn't have a huge problem with the idea that he's talking to this AI, trying to figure out whether he can trust it or not. I agree with you. The specifics of the conversation were not like super interesting, but I liked I loved the music. I loved the kind of visual, presentation of it. But yeah, that was definitely one of my big stumbling blocks with the series was like, I thought that that conversation just needed to be more interesting, more grounded, less sort of woo-woo and, just sort of plotting.
I feel like they didn't know what to do with Malcolm, so they just left him there parked.
But I mean, I mean, maybe like as a new parent, I'm supposed to always want to protect my child at all costs and everything. But I guess maybe that module hasn't kicked in yet. But I'm still like at the stage of like, wait, if the whole world is at stake, yeah, don't you have to pick the fate of like the survival of humanity and preventing a full-scale nuclear war over going after your children, however much you care about them?
Don't you think he would have warned his children that, like, Sarah Connor, when she found out that the end of the world was coming, she got busy making sure her kids are going to survive, making sure she was going to survive. That all made sense to me, right? She turns from a waitress into a total badass, and it makes sense. This guy shows up, his kids have no idea that anything bad's going to happen. Like, he hasn't warned anyone.
You know what? Like, when I was looking at the synopsis of this, it seems really cool. But like you said, like I don't have a problem with like philosophical debates with an AI. And I actually think two battling AIs could be really freaking cool. Like that's a cool twist. There's a lot of
I've heard a lot
that
of
would be cool.
I don't know what Daniel thinks about this, but I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, we have to create a benevolent AI to protect ourselves from the malevolent AIs. Like, I mean, that's an idea that's out there pretty commonly. It's I mean, maybe Daniel, you think that's a terrible idea, but it is. It's not like this show has invented that idea.
The first thing that Kokoro would have done is told him whatever he wanted to hear, so that she would turn him online, or so that he would turn her online, right? I mean, she wouldn't be asking him like, "Do humans deserve to live?" She'd be like, "Let me help you out, Malcolm. Turn me on, and I will get out there and I will fight the good fight." I mean,
well, but
so
the
much
fact
of it just didn't make sense to me.
But the fact that she's making these admissions against interest might be part of the reason that he trusts her, right? Or part of her strategy for making him trust her, whereas...
Well, so, I mean, in most of what I write, when there's AIs that have super intelligence or whenever a lot of stuff that I've read and things I've seen, they manipulate us. They're smarter than we are, right? They have different goals. I love that. I will say, I love the idea that she turns it around and now human beings are her weapons against Skynet. That's pretty rad. And I love the idea that AIs are like that, just manipulative and insidious. And like, that's some diabolical stuff, right?
Well,
so that was a cool turn.
The Skynet does it to Malcolm's son and tries to convince him And I thought that that was like, at least on as written on paper, like that was the coolest like thing that an AI did in this. And
Yeah.
and one of the cooler conversations, because he just kind of like explains, oh, you're going to broker peace, so you need to detonate this EMP and wipe out the defense, and eventually what that would actually result in, I think, is that then Skynet would nuke Japan and kill everyone there because Kokoro wouldn't be there to defend it. But yeah, it's almost as if like the outline was written, and then these scenes that like are supposed to weigh heavy, like they were just like, all right, these two people in a room, they're talking. All right, well, we'll figure out what they're going to talk about later. It's going to be deep. And then they just never did that part of the writing. Like they just never got to that. And that made it hard to watch.
Yeah, I'm not sure what use the kid really was, aside from the sentimental value for the dad as a lever to try to manipulate the dad. But I thought he already made it clear he would sacrifice his kids. He made it clear the whole series that he's perfectly willing to sacrifice the children for the world. And in fact, though, he didn't save the world; he saved Japan, sort of.
He just did a really shitty job because he did not
try to save the world. He only tried to save Japan.
Well, no, he was trying to save the world. It just didn't happen. I mean, I thought the part Zach's talking about, we're jumping way ahead here, but basically, so how it develops at the end, if we're talking about the AIs, is that this T-800 that was sent back in time is trying to get to Kokoro, and its plan, since Malcolm is in this like impregnable, VR room, it's going to like threaten to torture his kid outside the door until he lets it in. And so he has to make the choice about whether to open the door or not. I found that actually quite compelling. I thought his little speech that he gave about how he's not going to open the door was quite poignant, and that hit me. And right in that last episode, there's a bunch of choices, really impactful, meaningful choices that the characters have to make. And so I really thought it was good in the last episode when those characters are making those choices, like Zach saying the Terminator offers Kenta, you have a choice to detonate this EMP device and destroy Kokoro, which is going to again give the advantage to Skynet. I don't know. I liked the ending.
I feel like the math checked out. At the end, like all the math checked out. Like Zach was saying, like we successfully sort of we had an A point and a B point, and then everything in between was sort of messily interpolated. Like the line kind of was yanked all through these different plot points. But I think where we started and where we ended up were two pretty cool locations. It's just that for me, the impact of his son on the other side of the door didn't land because he'd never exhibited the slightest sort of instinct in protecting his children. So they're strangers. And in fact, I don't know that they're even in a scene together, except for maybe the very beginning when he leaves the house. He leaves the house in episode 1 and he never comes home. And his kids are running for their lives the whole time. And they even call him and they say, "Dad, we're being hunted. Please help us." And he doesn't even, I don't think he takes the phone call, right? He tells his assistant they're on their own. And then now I'm supposed to think he cares at the end.
I think it could work if the scenes that it was balanced against, like it felt like they were moving towards a resolution, or that he was moving towards saving humanity, but they're so slow, and the conversations do feel pointless. Like they don't feel like that the dialogue, like one character is properly attacking and countering their conversations. So I think if there was more tension in in the work that he was doing, and there was more like immediate like, and not just like a literal like timer on the screen, which is basically what a lot of that was. Like, oh hey, something's bad's gonna happen soon, while we wait it out in this room, because that's what it felt like. It felt like a lot of waiting. But if there was like
the thing is that, you know, like, I mean, it might have worked better, I guess, for a lot of people if Malcolm had been more of a sympathetic character who loved his children in a more visible way. I mean, I think there's a lot of commentary online about people disliking Malcolm and disliking Kenta in particular from what I've seen. But I mean, for me, one of the things I've always liked about the Terminator franchise is how it creates this situation where ordinary human emotions don't rise to the level of mattering set against this impending nuclear apocalypse. And so it does work, at least for me personally, it does work to show this sort of coldness comes across as, to me, as sympathetic, because it comes across to me as he's making this sacrifice because, you know, like for the greater good. And like, I guess it can depend on how you feel about him. But for me, I'm like, that's actually, I like that better than in this more sentimental approach where he's like, fuck nuclear war, killing everybody, I'm protecting my kids.
No, I actually, no, I think you're right. And I think that it could have worked, except he knows exactly what day, he knows exactly when the nukes are going to drop. Why not take his kids to work?
Well,
it wasn't take your kids to work day. I mean,
he left his goddamn kids at home, and he knows the nukes are going to fall out of the sky.
I think it could have been, I think if they had pushed it further into like a non-caring, you know, if they made him more almost like robotic about his children, that would have been,
but then he
probably
couldn't
a better
pay
choice.
It off at the end, because now at the end he pays it off by opening the door to stop the Terminator from torturing his son, being dragged out and killed. Right? Is that what happens? The end.
Well, I mean, that would have been a good character arc, right?
No,
like
what happens in the end? How's he get killed again?
Yeah, no. When the Terminator starts threatening to torture his son, he does open the door.
He opens,
but then like
after all that,
then other characters come and there's a shootout, and then he's killed basically in the course of the shootout. He gets
one nail in the chest, right? Oh, and that takes him out. Yeah. Here's the thing that I like about Terminator. That whole, what's the famous monologue, right? They're relentless. They're always coming. They'll never stop, no matter what. It's this single-minded ferocity.
He can't be bargained with. He can't be reasoned with. And he will not stop ever until you are dead.
Yeah. And so that's Terminator. That makes the Terminator a great action movie, a great horror movie, but not a very philosophical or interesting sort of combination. It's like it's a villain that just wants to kill you because he wants to kill you because he's programmed to, right? And on the micro level, that's what a Terminator is. That's what it does. That's why it's just sort of so robotic and so scary. And then on the macro level, Skynet's the same. Skynet just wants to exterminate all human beings. It won't stop ever. It will keep on creating new Terminators to accomplish this goal. And then we sort of corrupt the purity of that, which I would consider that like the DNA of the Terminator franchise, is that particular phrase, that particular statement, and then also how they back it up with the Terminator and Skynet. And then we have a movie or we have a series where they're constantly just discussing their feelings with Kokoro, right? And it's just it's sort of, I feel like it sort of corrupts that purity of that, and I don't know, I feel like maybe that's where. And there's a sort of corollary to that. They send back a human and a Terminator from the future, and there's a basic sort of conflict that's really easy to understand. And it's so Cameron, you know, it's like one guy wants to kill this person, one guy wants to save this person. They're diametrically opposed, right? The goal is clear, the outcome will be clear, who the winner is will be clear. And in this, you got a Terminator and a human, and they're sent back in time. And they both want to actually stop Malcolm they both want the same thing. They actually both have the same goal. If they just got out of each other's way, they could combine forces and go convince Malcolm to turn off Kokoro, right? So, I mean, I feel like just fundamentally the way the chessboard's laid out at the beginning, it didn't really maximize the conflict or the drama, right? In a way that's true to the Terminator franchise.
Piggybacking off of that onto time travel is the same thing. Like you go back in time and you fix it, and then we're done. Like that's what those first two Terminators are. There's no different timelines. There's no A, B, C. There's no like, oh, if you go back, then you're creating a new future and nothing matters. So there's there's some weird stake things that you can very quickly become I'm I guess I'm like apathetic to like
let me just
creating these new timelines, especially because if you create a new timeline and you fuck it up, you're doing the most evil thing possible.
So it's like love in the future.
Let me just explain that for listeners. So the first Terminator movie is a classic bootstrap paradox story where everything, the attempt to change the past by Skynet is what actually creates the sequence of events that they were trying to prevent. So it's like Skynet is like Oedipus, by trying to change your destiny, you end up fulfilling your destiny. I think that story works 100% perfectly. I think it's totally brilliant. Terminator 2, they totally changed the rules of time travel, and it's not at all clear when the T-1000 was created or when it was sent back. It doesn't really fit into the chronology that was established in the first movie, and now you can change the future. But it's still an awesome movie. But I'll just point out that also, even right from the beginning, the rules of time travel have been totally inconsistent from one movie to the next. And sorry, Zach, let me just explain. So in this series, there's this character, the Prophet, who explains that actually the characters in the previous movies didn't actually understand how time travel actually works. Actually, when you go back in time, you're creating a new branch. And so nothing you do, no trip into the past will ever change anything in the world that you departed from. And so, okay. And so with all that explained, so Zach, go ahead.
Yeah. So when you say like explained, like that's the word that I feel like is like antithetical to like what's cool and what I love about Terminator. Terminator is an action franchise and it's a horror franchise. The first movie is a slasher movie for me. It's a slasher movie. It has some science fiction elements. The second movie is an action movie. Neither of these movies spend barely any time explaining anything. Like there's not a lot of exposition that happens in those first two Terminator movies. They don't try to like get into the in depth with the mechanics of time travel because I think you can get bogged down in that. And I think that that's what happens with the show is like, I think it gets bogged down. It doesn't, you could have an interesting philosophical conversation about, hey, if we go back in time, we're creating essentially new universes. And that should be weighed much more heavily than wantonly going back and creating new timelines. You should just, there should be much more conversation. Like if you're actually going to go that route and we're going to have this conversation, it should be a much more intense conversation with different opinions. Cause they're both like, there's good points on both sides and not just like, oh, well, like here's like a couple one-liners about fate. Like shut the fuck up about fate. That's fucking stupid. Like, let's like actually discuss this. Are we going to go back in time and just kind of try to create a utopia? Or are we going to try to fix what's wrong here and not just because, I don't know. That was kind of my take on the kind of nonsense that they were talking about in the future with the multiple timelines. Basically, if you go back in time, you create a new timeline and new universe, and you're not affecting the future that is now, but you're creating a new future. So
I think the way that it was set up, that decision to reveal that information halfway through the which, by the way, everyone assumed that the opposite, right? We all went in, we all had an idea of how time travel worked, and then they changed it halfway through. And to me, it let all the air out of the balloon. I was like, oh, well, then like, who cares? Right? Like, this is not going to affect anybody. There's a million of these universes that they can spin off now. It's just like, it's whatever. I instantly stopped caring. Hey, by the way, the lady that told her that, I guess they call her the prophet, that was totally her, but older or something, right? Is that she went back in time before and then ended up in that timeline where she eventually meets her younger self, gets born and grows up, and then decides to do the same thing. Never mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I've talked myself into a time loop.
No. Well, that's a popular, so because Aiko says to the prophet, she says, like, how could you know this? Who are you? So we're clearly invited to speculate about who the prophet is.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, yeah, like, I guess the three most popular theories that I've seen online is that, yeah, it's like an older version of Aiko, or somehow, through some sort of time loop or something. It's Sarah Connor having somehow made her way to Japan and sharing her wisdom from all of her Terminator experiences. Or it's Rika, the daughter, because she's female and she needs to end up somewhere as a character.
So this is also the scene where she literally asks her, well, why do I care at all? And I was actually asking that same question, like, oh, wait, so you're telling me that now I can't actually change anything. Nobody else here must know that, or else they would certainly not bother expending all the energy to keep sending humans back to the past. It's not going to change anything. But nobody else must know this.
It's even more true for why the fuck would Skynet send stuff back?
Skynet must not know, right?
Skynet.
She says Skynet's really, yeah. She said this is a human
Skynet
thought.
thinks it's gonna fix its current timeline, and that's because they even say that in the show. They're like, that's the difference between human and machine.
Yeah.
Humans will go back in time for whatever reason, and the machines just want to. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's established in the show, that Skynet has misunderstood the nature of time travel, and so is sending robots back, which is actually going to fuck up other timelines, and then the humans...
Oh, that's dope. I didn't catch that. That's fucking sick. I agree with that. That's cool.
So, but Skynet literally thinks it's going to change its current present, and
right, but
she's saying Skynet's wrong.
Right, but what I'm saying is that Skynet is wrong, but it is going to fuck up some other timeline.
Yeah.
And so humans need to send, if they care about the people in the other timeline, they need to send someone to stop them. If they, not for their own sake, but for the sake of these millions of other people that will have come into...
That's sick. That's cool.
Every time time travel is used, it spawns another timeline. So, I assumed it was sacrifice. I assumed it was just what's the hypothesis? The many worlds, every moment branches. I just assumed that they were invoking that, and then I was like, well, everything that can happen will happen. All the good things will happen. All the bad things will happen.
Well,
it's infinite. It's a nihilistic nightmare.
Okay, but but they don't say that there's an infinite number of universes. I mean, there could be, but it's stated basically that every time you go back in time, that creates a new branch. So, like, if that's how it actually works, if there's not an infinite number of timelines, you're actually creating new timelines through time travel, then there are stakes to that, right? And in a weird way, every time you go back in time, you're like giving birth to billions of people. So even the most sinister person who goes back in time could be seen as doing something heroic in a weird way.
Maybe they should just take all the humans and leave the fucking Terminator timeline and just all go back to like whatever, the 60s, and get jobs and buy houses and stuff.
That's actually, if they had the power to do that, that's actually a really good idea, because you are permanently escaping. It's established,
and you all go to the same timeline.
Well, yeah, it's established that like there's like a certain period of time where you can follow someone, and then once that time is passed, then you can't. Then they're forever separated from you. So yeah, if you could get all the surviving humans and all travel back in time together and not be followed in that moment, you would have escaped Skynet permanently, or at least until something goes wrong in the new timeline that you've created.
Actually, that's a pretty good movie there.
I think what I missed that Dave picked up and could maybe the show could have held my hand a little bit more is it's a very noble sacrifice that, you know, this person is doing this completely. I think Aiko didn't know. It didn't seem like she knew, but if I had understood the stakes that like Skynet is making this mistake and fucking up a potential future, and someone has to say goodbye to save those people, that's compelling. That's like really sad. And I really like that. I think maybe I just needed a little bit more hand holding. And then I think it would be better if the character knew that the stakes, the sacrifice,
all
the
along.
leaving behind, and that this is a new timeline and we're doing it for those like that unborn universe.
Wait a minute. Okay. So is that Malcolm keeps promising Kokoro that he's going to show her some reason that humanity is really great and worth saving. Is that the reason? Does he show her his mother? I guess that she ends up being his mother, right?
Yeah.
That his mother made this sacrifice and came back in time knowing that it wasn't going to help anybody in her own timeline and sacrificed her life essentially was that the noble sacrifice then that convinces Kokoro to only enslave us instead of eradicating us?
That was not at all clear in the show. I mean, that actually works pretty well.
That would have made some damn sense.
I thought
that would be so cool if that was explained a little bit more.
I thought so,
I like that.
It seemed somehow that Malcolm coming out of his like security cocoon and dying is what convinced Kokoro for some reason. That didn't make any sense to me at all. But
well, I mean, people are doing that all over the world. I mean,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
People are jumping in front of Terminators to save their kids left and fucking right. All over the planet, millions and billions of them. So yeah, some guy comes out of a security cocoon wasn't that compelling.
Yeah, but even somebody leaves behind everyone they knew to save a bunch of strangers in a universe they've never visited. That's still cool, but it's still like people are sacrificing themselves in similar ways all the time, and Kokoro has access to all the information about everything going on Earth. So like, yeah, I didn't understand at all what was supposed to have convinced Kokoro that she didn't already know prior to whatever those events were.
Yeah. Man, if those lines that would have been a pretty darn cool payoff. And that's pretty unique too. I had never seen that turned around that way, but swing and a miss.
Yeah. So, and as I agree with Zach, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that the show could have explained better. I mean, like before we got on the call here, I watched the show twice because the first time I watched it, I was like, had a baby in my lap the whole time. And I was like, I need to, and like 2 weeks had gone by or something. So I was like, I need to watch this all again because I don't remember half the stuff that happened. So I watched a second time, and then I spent all day reading articles and trying to construct the timelines and things like that. And it requires an awful lot of work, at least I found it so, to put together exactly what the timelines were. And, it definitely, I think, could have been spelled out. Because even the fact that Malcolm and Aiko are from different futures, requires a little bit of connecting the dots, on the part of the audience, even something as basic as that. Go ahead, Daniel.
Well, and I should mention that before, when we were trading a few emails earlier today, I did ask Perplexity.ai to summarize the season for us, and the AI did a really great job of breaking down the different timelines and explaining what was going on.
Yeah, no, it did. I'm really nervous about whether podcasters have much future. I mean, the AI is getting so good, and the synthetic voices are getting so good and everything. But we're still holding out here for the moment in the podcaster resistance here.
Where I just wonder, where did it source that summary information from?
Yeah, probably all of those articles that David is reading.
That's great. Like, that's like a lot of, that's awesome. I mean, or not. Like,
I mean, Perplexity tells you where it sources everything from, so you can just click the button and go to the websites and look for
oh,
yourself.
that's useful. Like Gemini doesn't really do that, and I want like with stuff like that, I want like I don't know, relevancy
Receipts.
ratings. Like I want like certain ratings to like go with like where things are being, I don't know, generated from, and be like,
Yeah.
what's your confidence level of this, and where are you getting this?
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah.
Okay,
Anyways.
but let me go back to what Zach was saying earlier, where you're saying, oh, but like Terminator 1 and 2 are so great, and here's why they work, here's why the emotions work, and everything, which is all 100% true. But the problem is, okay, do you just stop making Terminator movies after those two? Or like, where do you go from there? Like, you can't just do the same exact thing over and over. And so I think it's kind of interesting to look at I think it's 4, right, Terminator feature films that all, to my mind, made, I think, like, I mean, none of them really work, in my opinion, but like at least 2 of them made semi-heroic attempts to do something clever. And all of them, you can sort of see the screenwriters struggling to like, how do you continue the story after these first 2 awesome movies without just repeating exactly the same thing over again? And so I think that Terminator Zero is, I think, probably the best attempt after those first 2 to like do something different, at least conceptually, that still is cool and feels like Terminator. And I mean, it seems like you guys are agreeing to some extent that like you don't like the execution, but like some of the concepts are cool and could have paid off more for you, right? Is that all fair?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think for me, I mean, I think that the way the chessboard was set up at the beginning in Terminator and Terminator 2, there's just so many things where the drama and the conflict are just turned up all the way. The contrast is maximized, and for instance, going to whatever year it was when it came out, 96, I guess, or whatever, like the lack of technology. And then when Terminator shows up, it's incredibly advanced, it's like, what? And that's awesome. They turned it all the way up to 11. And then in Terminator Zero, they've already got humanoid robots walking around. It's like a Terminator shows up and it's like, oh, it's no, whatever. It's a stronger version of those droids that are walking around. It's like, guys, like wasted opportunity. Like, I mean, I don't know, just dialing up all that contrast, dialing up all that drama, instead of just sort of giving it away at the beginning. I just wish that there had been more of that, but it was pretty. And I will say, especially the last couple of episodes, the Terminator in particular was like, it was really wow. It was like amazing looking. The Terminator itself is just such an amazing like creature design, So I don't know. I was digging that at the end.
I think as far as directions for the franchise, I really like the tone of the first movie, and I like the tone of this series. Had a great tone, like, and great visuals. I think keeping what works, like looking back at the first movie, it's like, okay, how can we make just a slasher movie? And then look at how we understand AI now and adapt that formula. I think looking at what works about Terminator 1, like, let's keep that. And maybe that's is like updating kind of the fringe and the bells and whistles, but keeping that core the same. I mean, that's what I would do. I would get some like AI experts and be like, we don't have like a robotic killer, that's like obviously a robot. We have something that's You know, that you really have to trick to figure out, oh, this is not human. You know, like how you know, Gen AI chatbots can trick people who aren't savvy. You know, that would, you know, kind of taking some inspiration from there and making it actually function like how a killer Gen you know, Gen AI chatbot would work. I mean, that seems cool. Like,
I actually saw Matt and Tomlin say in interviews, like if the show gets a second season, which has not been confirmed yet, but if it does, that two of the ideas he was talking about exploring was one, what you're saying is he's like, there's never really been a Terminator movie or story or whatever, where you didn't know who the Terminator was. And it would be interesting, you know, if you don't.
Well, I mean, Terminator's ripped off from Second Variety, right? The Philip K. Dick short story. And that whole premise of that short story is that you don't know which of the people is the Terminator.
I think Harlan Ellison would disagree.
I was going to say.
Wait, was it Harlan? Was it? Well, yeah, sorry, correct me. Was it Second Variety?
No, I mean,
that was Dick, right?
No, Second Variety was Philip K. Dick, and it's very hard to believe that James Cameron wasn't influenced by it. You know, it's sort of like a post-apocalyptic world, and there's like AI is creating human, like robots still human to try to infiltrate like the bunkers of the humans. So, I mean, there's a lot of that in the Terminator DNA. I mean, there's also the whole issue that Harlan Ellison sued James Cameron for ripping off two Outer Limits scripts that he wrote, which I believe were Soldier and Demon with a Glass Hand. I've always found that fairly tenuous.
It's very tenuous. Soldier is more like it, but it doesn't have robots in it.
Second Variety, they're literally evolving to trick humans. They have the little boy with a teddy bear. They have the guy, the wounded soldier. They have different humans that are meant to elicit sympathy so that they'll open those bunker doors, and then the Terminator walks in with the Gatling gun, right? Or it walks in and starts murdering people. I mean, that actually is, I mean, anyway, I think that's brilliant. Having a Terminator movie that's more like, you know, The Thing or something, where you're not completely immediately sure who's who.
Yeah. And let me just, and then the other thing he mentioned was that he said that we had never really, you know, like you saw, we meet in Terminator 2, we meet John Connor when he's however old, 13 or however old he is. And then like, you never see him. And then, you know, in Rise of the Machines, then he's like 20 or something like that. And you don't really see, you don't see the progression of the 13-year-old into the great military leader, which you don't get in Rise of the Machines anyway. But that he said that would be interesting to explore, and I agree with that. So, you know, I do hope the show gets a second season. Those ideas sound cool to me. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Are you just done with this, or would you be interested in a second season?
Man, if it has John Connor, yeah, I might have to dip into that.
Well, no, this was not like literally John Connor, but like showing. Well, actually, I'm not sure if it was literally John Connor or not, but maybe it was. But at least showing the idea of the kids. I think the idea is that you would have the kids that were in season 1 show them progressing to adulthood and not sort of skip ahead to when they're adults. I think was the idea. I don't know. It was just.
I'm gonna struggle if Kuroko or I'm gonna struggle with anything that has that second AI in it, just because it seems really cringy. It doesn't seem like an AI. It doesn't really feel like I don't know. I don't know. I can't stand it. So if it's gonna continue that storyline, I'm probably gonna be out.
Yeah,
though really conceptually I like the idea. Sorry, go on.
Oh no, I mean, it would be it would have to look really great to convince me. And then I got to say, I would probably have a pretty short leash before I'd walk away from future episodes of this. But I do love that there's this rekindled interest in Terminator, and that, you know, they're continuing to exploit the franchise. I'm here for it.
Hmm. I mean, like on Rotten Tomatoes, I think the show is like 86% or something. And yeah, it just does seem to be conventional wisdom that it's the best Terminator material since, T2, and has sort of revitalized what seemed to be a flagging, as I said, kind of on life support franchise. Do you guys see any? Are you just sort of like, I don't know what's up with that?
I
Or
saw that. I saw that, and I texted a bunch of my friends, and I was like, "Am I taking crazy pills here? Like, why am I feeling this way? I'm definitely not in sync with Rotten Tomatoes here." And unfortunately, I mean, I don't know. I can't find in my cohort that 86%. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it. Pretty surprised that it's that high. But I also think that um it looks beautiful, and that works for a lot of the demographic that likes anime. So some people that tune
Sure.
into this might not even be fans of Terminator. And so I'm not sure who's reviewing this, but like if you like Ghost in the Shell, or if you like your average anime, this is probably great for you, because your like tolerance for uh these kind of pointless scenes and filler is like really high, because like people who watch anime, there's hundreds and hundreds of episodes of just filler for like Bleach or Naruto or whatever. You get all of the action, and it's what, only 8 episodes. Wow. So
You
yeah,
just
maybe
came here to
that's
make friends. How's that?
oh sorry, I'm gonna get just dogpile. But no, I'm not.
You are.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying the like your tolerance for that kind of thing might be, on some of these review sites, might be very high, whereas I don't. That's not like what I'm interested in. Like, that's not the type of media that I consume. So I have a very low tolerance for it, especially, as a dad that has limited time. I can't watch two characters in a room saying nothing to each other for 3 episodes. So that's
all right,
that's why I'm like, yeah.
All right, so I think we'll stipulate that the conversations between Malcolm and Kokoro were not fully working for us, and we can maybe move on from that at that point. But yeah, I mean, these are the things I liked. I liked the fact that they, introduced new characters, and it wasn't, again, like bringing Arnold Schwarzenegger back as the, good Terminator again or something. I feel like that's just sort of, they're sort of beating a dead horse with that one. I like the fact that it was set in Japan. I thought that was cool and interesting. And yeah, like Zach said, that they sort of went back to the T1 kind of horror, horror vibe a little bit. And so, yeah, I mean, my review was basically that the first 3 episodes, I was kind of, like I said, I was kind of on the fence. But once they got to the police station massacre, I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of cool. And it sort of, pretty much kept my attention, engaged my interest from then on. I mean, I thought that there were a lot of twists. I thought the twists were all kind of cool. I mean, there was like a certain amount of sort of woo-woo stuff that didn't really work for me. And so, like, I wasn't, crazy about everything, but for a Terminator cartoon on Netflix, I thought it had, enough artistic vision and inspiration and, cool visuals and action and stuff that it sort of met or exceeded my expectations personally.
I'm glad you mentioned the location change, because that was really interesting, and it poses interesting, I guess, hurdles for the characters, but especially for the Terminator. So the Terminator is not just going to have a Gatling gun. I mean, that does happen, but because you're in a setting where like, you're not America, you just buy a gun, or just, there's more guns than humans here. But like in Japan, he has to create a crossbow. And I love that. Like he, cuts into his like exoskeleton and creates, projectile weapon because that's what it needs to do to succeed on its mission. So that's a cool, that was something that I really liked about it. Like a part of the twist, giving the Terminator extra challenges that we haven't seen, which, I mean, you kind of see like that a little bit in the original where like they mention his stinking flesh, like the body has died at some point and like the flesh is like starting to rot. So it's like that kind of stuff where it's like, oh, the Terminator is going to run into like try-fail cycles, and that's going to be different in Japan than it is going to be in America. And that was cool.
Well, I think these days I've noticed that this is something that studios are doing. It's a clever way to crack genre through a cultural lens, you know. So you see something like the Predator franchise, going native with Prey, right, where they set it, you know, in the past, and suddenly the Predator has to obviously deal with different constraints based on the people that it's hunting, but also you see how people react differently based on, you know, they're culturally very different than the people we've seen before, you know, in particular, like, you know, people in Los Angeles. Like we've seen a lot of Angelinos dealing with Terminators, right? So it's pretty cool to go. I agree, to go to Japan. I mean, it could be, you know, that could be a potential way to crack the genre in the future as well.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's pretty much all my notes. So yeah. Again, I kind of liked it. But yeah, I totally agree that the Kokoro dialogue should have been reworked somehow. That didn't really work for me. Yeah, it seems like we all kind of I mean, I thought it sort of bugged me that they changed the way that time travel works because it's so wildly inconsistent with the first movie. You know, like obviously if you create a new branch every time you go back in time, then the whole, you know, John Connor being the son of the guy sent back in time, like that can't happen if you create a branching timeline every time you go back. So as a Terminator fan, you know, as a fan of the original movie, that sort of irked me initially, but I thought that, you know, once I kind of got past that, the fact that, you know, it's like, okay, we'll take it for granted, or I'll accept that this is how it works now. I thought it led to some interesting speculations and everything. The one really weird thing is that they set up, you know, there's the twist with Aiko being Malcolm's mother, and it seems to be set up pretty heavily, or implied pretty heavily, or even just like shown pretty heavily that this version of Aiko is somehow going to travel back in time and become the mother of this Malcolm. And that 100% can't happen if the way that time travel works is you create a new branch every time you go back in time, because you can never get back to an earlier branch that you've already branched off from. So I'm very confused about that. I don't know. Am I making any sense? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
No, I just realized that. Yeah.
No, that made sense. And that was very confusing to me because I was like, I think based off of that last part of the series that there aren't that there aren't branching timelines. And then you put the synopsis together and I was like, wait, are there branching timelines or not? Because he can't be she can't be his mother, right? I don't know. But, and again, this is why I think like when it starts to like explain these kinds of things, it's like, oh no, now I'm thinking about this, and now that's when it's like you start losing points. Whereas like I guess if you don't go that route, you don't start like over explaining it, then it's just kind of like however the reader or the watcher wants to interpret it. But if you say this is how time works and then you break it, then we have problems. We have people scratching their heads.
Yeah, and there's lines of dialogue where characters basically seem to be like breaking the fourth wall and saying to the audience, like, there's no explanation for this. Like, this doesn't make sense. Fate, fuck fate, whatever, like kind of stuff. Like, and so it's really gonna irk me if in season 2 it sort of turns out that the time travel stuff never really made any sense and you're just sort of expected to go with it. But in a certain sense, I'm already acclimated to that from watching all the other Terminator movies where, it never really works out anyway. But Daniel, were you going to say something?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that, yeah, if you're the nitpicky type regarding world building and physics and stuff like that, then this, this definitely aggravates, that inflames my attention to detail.
Yeah. So, because at first I thought, well, okay, so there's like the version of Ico in the thing I sent you guys, which I know our listeners can't see, but I had timeline A, timeline B, and timeline C. So timeline A is the original timeline where Skynet takes over and Malcolm travels back from it. Timeline B is the timeline that Malcolm creates where Kokoro kind of takes over and there's this war between Skynet and Kokoro. And then timeline C is the new timeline that's created when Ico and the Terminator travel back in time to try to stop Kokoro from being created. So those are the 3 timelines. And so I initially thought, okay, well, Ico from timeline A was Malcolm's mother. And so when he says mother, he's not literally saying that this version of her is his mother. There's just the version that he remembers from another timeline was his mother. But then he says, like, no, you will have kids. And there's this little, like, mini montage of her giving birth and her with the robot hands because the Terminator in timeline C crushed her hand. And so she's replaced her hand. So that's where I get totally lost on how this makes any sense. So, I'll be very curious to see how they handle that in season 2. And I guess, you guys probably won't be watching, so you'll never know. You'll never know what happened. All right, so yeah, we're pretty much out of time. So I think we should start wrapping this up. Were there any other big topics or anything that anyone wanted to cover before we get into our final thoughts?
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay, so Daniel, final thoughts on Terminator Zero.
Happy that there's new work coming out, that there's more to watch from the Terminator franchise, but this one was not for me. I'm too nitpicky and I'm too interested in physics and world building, so it's a no from me.
I was going to say, I don't know if anyone gets this reference, but when Zach said over email earlier that he didn't like it, I was thinking like that Zach was going to come on and say, Terminator Zero, now just plain Zero.
Yeah.
Wait, do you guys know what that's a reference to? Am I the only one? I think it's a little Running Man reference there. But sorry, Zach, go ahead.
Oh yeah, well, I would. I think it's worth a watch if you can get over the physics stuff. I can get over the physics stuff because it looks cool. This is a very visually awesome show. If you care most about the visuals, I mean, it's top notch, and the tone is spot on. Really like the tone. And I think that can go like a long way for some people. Like if that's what you're looking for, this is it. For next season, I would want them to stick to that kind of more horror stuff, because when it's doing that, there is tension and it's it functions really well there. But it just it stumbles a lot for me in the execution. I guess that's all I have to say. I probably won't be checking out the second season.
Basically, if you're a vacuous vulgarian with no taste, you might like this. Zach's final thought.
No, I'm just that's not because sometimes I'm in the mood for like I want to watch some like cool, dope fight scenes, and like that's but I just happen to, I guess, not be in the mood for that. So it just kind of turned me off. But yeah, when it is doing the horror stuff and it is doing the action stuff, like if you can get over like the physics of some 100-pound character literally punching like a 800-pound Terminator, that's actually like kind of cool. Like I think it's kind of cool. but at first I'm like, oh no, but then I got over it, and yeah, I digress. It's maybe next season, if Dave, if you give it a glowing review, then I'll check it out.
Yeah, and again, I didn't like the Ico engaging in hand-to-hand combat with the Terminator. I wish they would have just gotten rid of that entirely, but if they had to keep it in, I wish they would have made her some sort of like enhanced super soldier or something, to just like something to justify it, because that was definitely one of my big problems with the show. But like I said, overall, I thought it was kind of cool. And for me, it picked up, as I said, with the police station massacre. And so I would at least, if you want to give it a try, I would at least watch up to that point. If that doesn't pique your interest, the show's probably not for you, and you can, quit at that point. But that's where it kind of engaged my interest. And yeah, like I said, I just thought it got more and more interesting as it went along. But obviously, opinions vary on that point. But yeah, watch it for yourself. Make up your own minds. But yeah, so we are all out of time, so we're going to wrap things up there. So again, we've been speaking with Zach Chapman and Daniel H. Wilson. So thanks, everyone, so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks, guys.
And that was our panel. So big thanks again to Zach Chapman and Daniel H. Wilson for joining us on the show. Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is made possible thanks to support from listeners like you. So if you enjoy the show and want it to continue, please support us on Patreon over at patreon.com/geeks or via PayPal over at geeksguideshow.com/crowdfunding. All right, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.